Thank you very much, and don't forget, this video was made possible by my patrons on Patreon. Want to support me? The link is on the screen. Sincerely yours, VisualPony, and enjoy this audiobook. The Lunar Cypher, Chapter 11. Preparations. The dark magic monsters were a more serious threat than I had first thought. I went over Xuri's information carefully and adjusted my plans once again. I still had confidence we could wipe out the monsters with minimal risk, but we would have to do it quickly. Once we engaged them, they would adapt to counter our forces. Just during the short time we had fought the first group, Big Ugly had managed to produce many more capable flyers in response to our aerial attack. And Xuri reported that after several skirmishes with her people, the monsters besieging them now closely resembled changelings. At the top of my checklist of that day's tasks and preparations was one little empty box. Armor conditioning. I grimaced. I had left my armor in Canterlot Castle. It was a convenient excuse to have a day off from carting all that weight around, but the blank space on my list stared back at me accusingly. Well, I was scheduled to have tea with Celestia and I could pick it up then. Half a day off would have to do. I went through everything else on my list and then went out and checked on the work on Even Star. If there had been time, I would have included magical armor similar to solar flares, but beyond the fitting of the wire it needed complex and tedious spell work, and I'd never be able to finish before we needed to leave. The structural repairs and modifications were complete and the new patches were being painted over. I noticed that there was a simple sun and moon symbol in gold painted next to the portside bridge hatch. Below it was the words, Ironwood Pass. It wasn't any bigger than my hoof, and it hadn't been a part of Even Star's original decoration.
"Excuse me?"
I called out to the Pegasus working on the hull nearby.
"What's this?"
He glided over and gave me the little head bob that took the place of a bow for a pony in flight. "Oh, that's her battle medallion, Your Highness. Hasn't been one of those awarded since the Second Griffin War, I hear."
"Ah, I see."
I had very mixed feelings about that.
"And Ironwood Pass is where we were?"
"Yes, ma'am. Well, we were about 3 miles from the pass, but that's the nearest named place that any pony knew of." I almost told him to paint it over. I didn't want my sweet, pretty pleasure craft turned into a weapon of war. But there were now firing pods cut into her hull, armor plates over the rudder and elevator joints, and attached points for anti-boarding netting. Even Star was now a warship, because she needed to be. It was too late to pretend otherwise. When I entered my second year at school, Mom and Dad had talked with me about what I wanted to do with my education. Medical research was my top choice, and maybe a teaching position as well. Me being me, I had several backup careers all planned out as well. Nowhere on the list was Princess or Defender of the Realm. I sighed and touched the wheel of the moon. It was time to leave for Canterlot. Time for tea and armor. Celestia was waiting for me in the gazebo in the upper palace garden. A sumptuous high tea had been set out. Lots of little sandwiches, sweets, and cakes in addition to 3 different pots of tea. I was determined to make it a pleasant hour or so. It would be the last time I would see the princess before I left for the Badlands, and I wanted to take away only simple, happy memories. If I hadn't known Celestia so well, I might have managed it. She apologized, again, for the scene in the castle dining hall, and I reassured her that I was deliriously happy with Luna and that I was still performing all my princessly duties.
"Well,"
she said, smiling kindly,
"if you are happy together, then perhaps everything will turn out fine."
And right then I knew. Despite her attempt to hide it, Celestia was sadder than I had ever seen her before. Combined with Shining's little slip-up at dinner the night before, it pointed to only one conclusion.
There's something you're not telling me. Something important.
Her smile didn't slip at all.
Yes, of course there is, Twilight, but I gave you my promise not to interfere.
I put on my grumpy face. Celestia's smile went all indulgent. The battle of facial expressions went on for another few moves, and then Celestia sighed and said,
It will not matter if you know or not. Nothing will change, and it will only make you unhappy.
Well, that was a winning move right there. She had maneuvered me into asking her to interfere, and if it made me unhappy, it would be my own fault. Checkmate. I had lost the game, but that didn't prevent me from tossing off a barb as I went down in defeat.
And now that you've told me that much, I've got to know the rest, or I will be unhappy and suspicious.
She didn't quite roll her eyes at me. Celestia didn't do eye rolls.
Very well, Twilight.
In a flash of magic, she brought forth a small, jeweled box and put it down on the table in front of us. I peered down at the decoration on the curved top of the box. Any pony with an interest in history or lurid tales would have recognized it.
That's Fireflower's mark.
It is, Celestia said and lowered her head to tap the mark with the tip of her horn. There was a click and the lid of the box popped open slightly. I looked at the box as if it might contain a viper.
From everything I've read, the Mad Wizard of Serpentspire was an enemy of Equestria.
Fireflower's reputation was not a good one, but there were no records of any pony doubting her ability. Celestia lifted the lid and took out one of the tightly rolled scrolls within. To my disgust, I realized that it was actually parchment. Fireflower's dealings with the Griffin Empire must have influenced her in unsavory ways if she had kept her records on the dried skin of dead animals.
No, she wasn't my enemy, though she certainly wasn't a friend. And she was not mad. She had the gift and the burden of prophecy. When the ruin of her tower was searched, this box was found. It will open only to my touch. Inside were 20 scrolls that could not be unrolled or read until a certain date had passed. In the past, some of them have been very helpful to me. Others, well...
Celestia's mouth twitched briefly in what I thought was distaste, and then she continued.
At the last new moon, the final scroll's seal dissolved.
Celestia passed the scroll to me and I held the revolting thing up and opened it. The angular brown lettering was a little difficult to decipher, but it still only took a short while to read the entire thing.
Begins the setting of the sun, when night and evening join as one. To save the day who sits on high, the mare of darkest hue must die.
I never thought that the old expression, my blood ran cold, was anything but a bit of poetic hyperbole. But that was exactly what it felt like when I finished reading. No wonder Celestia had been so opposed to Luna and I getting together. And then the answer to the riddle snapped into place and I laughed. Celestia looked at me like I was crazy.
Oh, sorry,
I said.
Maybe Luna hasn't mentioned it to you, but the nightmare has been lurking around in the dream realm, pestering me. She's the mare with the darkest coat. Nothing darker than black, right? Once we deal with the monsters from the desert, she's next on my list.
I beamed at her.
See? Problem solved.
Celestia blinked.
Could it be that simple? I don't see why not. I'm sure all the little nudges I've been getting from that black nag are leading up to something nasty. So I'm just going to shortcut her plans by finding out some way to get rid of her for good. Don't worry, it'll be fine.
Celestia smiled again and shook her head.
If it were any pony but you, Twilight Sparkle, I would dismiss your assurances. But with your past record, I am greatly encouraged.
I grinned and popped a little tea cake into my mouth.
You'll see, everything is going to be just fine.
The armor felt much lighter as I put it on. I'm sure my mood had something to do with it. I stopped by the jeweler's and picked up my order and then flew over to the infirmary. Captain Speedwell met me there and we talked briefly about how we were going to do the presentations before we entered the ward. Once inside, we moved from bed to bed, speaking with each pony and then awarding them the various medals I had commissioned. I felt a bit hypocritical actually. I couldn't see how passing out little bits of gold was in any way reward enough for what those ponies had been through, but they seemed truly touched by the gesture and I guess that was good enough. When we got to Private Flicker, he actually managed to smile.
"Thank you, Princess, and I've made my decision. Could you tell Princess Luna for me that I'd like to join her guard?"
He seemed a bit hesitant.
Are you sure?
"Yes, Your Highness."
He paused and grimaced.
"My mother isn't too happy about it, but it's the only way I'll be able to go with you back to the Badlands."
I'll tell her,
I said, marveling that a pony with such an easy excuse to hoof would be willing to throw himself back into battle after suffering such a crippling wound. Rainbow Dash was just as eager, but that mare is crazy. Every pony knows it.
Check it out, Twy.
She called to me, waving all 4 legs in the air.
Casts off and I'm ready to fly. Then why are you still in here?
I asked in some confusion. Fluttershy flipped back the sleeves, revealing a broad strap cinched around Rainbow's waist.
She's tied to the bed. Stupid doctor says I need more rest. He doesn't know me very well.
Someday, I, too, will be calm and imperturbable enough to be above rolling my eyes at my friend's little quirks. But I wasn't at Celestia's level of serenity that day.
Look at it this way,
I told her.
Solar Flare leaves here the day after tomorrow. You can't go aboard until then, so you might as well sleep here.
Dash crossed her forelegs over her chest, let out a huff of air which flipped up her forelock.
It feels like I've been here forever. Just one more day,
I told her.
And I believe Captain Speedwell has something for you.
The captain went through the formal words and set the medallion on Dash's chest.
Wow!
Dash said, grinning her head off.
A real medal for bravery!
I leaned over and tapped the little sun and moon disk with the edge of my hoof.
It says for bravery, but in your case it's actually for insane recklessness.
Dash laughed and said,
It's the same thing.
That was a classic Rainbow Dash attitude, and it was something that was going to have to change. Fortunately, I had a plan. I grabbed a quick bite to eat at the florist's and then spent the rest of the afternoon learning to pilot the old airship, Hasina. I already understood a lot of how aeronautics concepts like wind levels and thermoclines affected airships from the days when I had learned to pilot my old balloon, and I had taken the helm of Even Star on many occasions. But Hasina was a quite different experience. She was old and cranky, with propulsive fins instead of propellers, and her controls were both more complex and less accurate than modern equipment. She even had 2 rudders, one on the envelope and one on the hull. It didn't help that Hasina's hanging hull design made steering a very touchy process. Any overcorrection set up an oscillation between envelope and hull that was very difficult to ease out. Gudgeon told me that there had been cases of novice pilots on these old types that had fallen into the trap of chasing the needle, and actually tearing the ship apart in their frantic efforts to get back on course, particularly in bad weather. Even the most responsive airship turns very slowly. A pilot who thinks she hasn't given the ship enough rudder because the compass needle doesn't begin to turn immediately will often oversteer, then overcorrect when trying to compensate, sometimes leading to wild oscillations. Gudgeon and the rest of the crew were very patient with me, and when I had gotten comfortable with normal flight, I practiced maneuvering without one or more of the big fins to simulate battle damage. I knew it would take me a much longer amount of time than I had to get good at that sort of thing, but it was a good idea to at least have a grasp of the concept. Even with both rudders completely disabled, I could steer the ship by varying the amount of power to the two propulsive fins.
The worst scenario is if you've lost one power fin and the hull rudder, Gudgeon told me. We won't try that today because it's dangerous even under controlled conditions and in good weather. In that case, it's best to shut down power completely and use your ballast or gas venting controls to get to an elevation with the wind going the way you want to go.
That or you abandon ship,
I said.
Well,
Gudgeon said, squinting at me out of one eye.
I don't reckon you're planning on bringing her back in any case, Your Highness.
I smiled at him and gave him a little nod of acknowledgement. Clever pony, that Gudgeon. I left Hasina to her delivery crew and flew back to Ponyville on my own. I arrived about an hour before sunset and was greeted by my secretary in the council chamber. She had a stack of papers and a stationery box floating by her side.
Miss Rarity wishes to see you as soon as possible, Periwinkle said, passing me a note on lavender paper. The mayor is showing signs of panic about the presence of Queen Chrysalis and her entourage.
A scroll with a Ponyville seal.
The chef wishes to know what changelings eat and how many there will be for dinner.
A nearly indecipherable scrawl on the back of an old menu.
And Captain Zephyr would like an update on the schedule.
A crispy folded slip of white paper.
I've handled all the rest myself. I can give you a summary if you like, Your Highness.
I hastily wrote out replies to everything but Rarity's note. I added a letter to the treasurer instructing her to raise Periwinkle's salary by 10%.
Where is Rarity now, do you know?
I asked Periwinkle.
She is in your chambers,
she said.
She is complaining about the lack of closet space.
I hot-hoofed it to my suit to find the doorway half blocked by a large chest and a portable clothes rack. There were also several pastel-colored boxes scattered about.
Oh, darling, I'm so glad you're back,
Rarity said.
I just can't seem to find enough space for everything, and you must help me decide on your evening wear. Evening wear? You're dining with a royal princess and a queen tonight. You simply can't go all natural. Yes, I know that Chrysalis is of dubious quality, but she is royalty nevertheless. And that outfit of hers is quite striking. The Gothic look is passé, but she seems to pull it off well enough.
She sniffed, hung up the dresses she had been levitating, and lifted a necklace out of one of the boxes.
Don't worry, I'm sure that we can do better. These opals are nice, don't you think?
Beautiful, I assured her.
But right now I'm going to get out of my armor and take a shower. Oh, of course, dear. But please, before you go, give me a hint about what sort of look you want to present. Stiff or casual elegance? Perhaps stern and commanding on the eve of battle? You can do that with just a dress? Darling, you would simply not believe what I can do with just a dress.
She smirked at me. Well, there was only one pony I was worried about making an impression on, and it certainly wasn't Chrysalis.
Can you make me look, attractive?
Rarity dropped the necklace.
What?
I asked after she had stared silently at me for several seconds. She sighed and shook her head.
Twilight, you are a very beautiful mare. I can enhance or emphasize your various qualities, but I will only be accentuating what is already there.
Rarity is a great friend. It was really sweet of her to try boosting my confidence like that. I smiled at her.
Whatever you think Luna will like,
I said as I began unbuckling my armor.
It says, I am the most gorgeous thing you've ever laid eyes on, and if I deign to glance in your direction for more than an instant, you will feel like the luckiest pony alive. It says all that? Really? Verbatim, dear. Come, look in the mirror.
I had to admit it. Rarity had made me look really good. The slinky black dress, combined with star sapphire accessoires and a bit of makeup, did wonders for me. The shimmering fabric flowed and swirled as I moved, revealing an occasional flash of leg. The jewelry sparkled in the light, and the upswept hairdo with ringlets to either side of my face gave it all a touch of elegance.
You're astounding, Rarity! Yes, I rather am, aren't I?
She gave me a peck on the cheek.
Go forth and conquer, darling. All I ask is that you describe in detail the look on Luna's face when she first sees you.
Author's note. Released early because I will be hiking far from cellular reception all through the holiday weekend, and I didn't want to make you guys wait until Monday. To all my fella Merkins, I hope you have a great Independence Day and don't blow off any of your parts. Mis amigos, academos ya status muchas gracias por asistir. Yes, I've run out of ways to say it in English, so I'm improvising. I'll probably end up tapping it out in Morse code at the end of chapter 97. Narrator's note. Or comment time if you want. So what do I have to say? First of all, you can support me via my Patreon, the link is in the description, and every dollar is appreciated and needed. So, now let me say this. This chapter is actually pretty nice, but there is this prophecy Celestia has from that pony that had, that used parchment, so basically dried skin to, keep her notes. Yeah, so, okay, we learned that this, pony, I don't remember her name now, it was something with fire. That's what I remember. Had affiliations with the Griffin Empire, so it would be interesting to know a little more about that pony, but I don't know if we'll actually get a little more info on her. This was just like a plot device, I think, that was put in here to explain why Celestia was meddling that badly. On other notes, this part with, can you make me look, attractive? That part. Oh my god. I had totally forgotten about that. I kinda like that part. I really do. And of course, when she is learning how to pilot that old airship and that sailor dude tells her that he doesn't believe that she's planning on bringing that old airship back. So yeah, why would she ask for an old disposable airship if she was planning to bring it back? Seriously. It doesn't take a clever pony to deduct that. Of course, I hope that her dress will be, in the end here, her dress will be well received. I mean, why not? I mean, Rarity is a master of her craft, even though I don't like her character very much, but she is a master of her craft. She knows what she does. Yeah, and there's basically not much else to say here, so I'll just leave you on that note. We'll see how that dinner goes next week. And sincerely yours, VisualPony.